Yeah.
That's at my club.
I told you, there's no freaking pictures of you, so I have to actually grab a picture of you and T-Pain. It was either that or you and Tom Green, dude, okay? So, all right, everybody, what's up? We're back. Well, actually, Paul's back from the holidays.
Hey. Hello.
Me and John have been back for
whatever.
Last week.
You hard workers, you.
Yeah.
Overachievers.
Overachievers. I'm sorry, John. I didn't mean to malign you.
Oh man. Well, welcome to episode 37 of Climbing the Ladder, and the three of us are here again as always. But we want to welcome Mr. Tobias Sherman, aka Tumba, to the show. What's up?
What's going on, guys? Pleasure to be here. It's an honor to be here. Big fan of Paul, so super excited. I'm gonna fanboy out on him a little bit here.
What about us?
You guys too.
We're big fans of Paul.
What is that?
Well, Chris, you're amazing. Chris, you're so shockingly handsome. I'm actually going to have the screen on my second monitor. Of course, John Clark's a staple in esports. So,
thank you.
This is funny because the first thing he says is, he's a big fan of Paul's. He didn't even know you were on the show until like 5 minutes ago.
I didn't know he was a host. I knew he was on the show.
Oh, okay, all right. I give you that.
Because I can read Skype.
True. All right, for those of you who don't know, Tobias, he was once a caster. I think a lot of people probably seen some of your casting back in MLG. And
I feel bad for them.
But now he's kind of moved on and doing some bigger and better things. He's a co-founder of eSports Management Group, and we're going to be talking a lot about that and some of the things that they're doing there, and just what his views on the industry are right now. But I figure we start off the show talking about a little bit about just some of the recent news, and just whoever has any comments about any recent news, and I'll throw one out there to begin with. Let's talk about Richard and Rachel right off the bat.
All right.
Oh, goody.
So did y'all catch that?
Yeah.
Why don't you give a synopsis for people?
Oh shit, man! Right. Maybe we'll move on. Maybe we'll move on to TSL then. How about TSL?
No, I think it's an important subject. I don't want to just ignore it. I mean, it's something that came up today. It touched me slightly, even though I had nothing to do with it.
Sure.
Bottom line is this, right? Richard Lewis raised a perfectly valid point. Let's put that one out there to start with. The problem is that he raised it in a very inflammatory way, as far as I'm concerned. And he started off by saying a real interviewer, as if to say the guy, the person doing the interview wasn't a real interviewer, or the real interviewer is. So that was a slight slur, which I think got Rachel's back up initially. And then basically what he was saying, in my mind anyway, and he can correct me on Twitter if he can't because I've blocked him. But that's another story. Another story. Basically what I think he was trying to say, and his point was valid, is this. He was saying that effectively females get a leg up. In other words, they get, if they're pretty and they dress up well and they put the makeup on and they look lovely, that they'll get offered a way of doing things quicker than maybe a male would. Now, he didn't say that they would, but he said a decent interviewer would have asked that question. Now, that point I can agree with. I think he's right. It's a perfectly valid question to ask. The trouble is, of course, he's asking someone who actually I don't believe has had that leg up. I think Rachel has worked very hard. The times I've worked with her, I've seen how much passion she's got for gaming, genuine passion, and she's worked very hard at improving as a host. So, tough to ask that question to someone like her, and I think she got a little bit defensive, if I'm honest, and maybe she shouldn't have. But that's her prerogative. I have to say this and throw this one out there. She gets an awful lot of shit thrown at her by all sorts of different people, and she takes it with very good grace and carries on doing a great job and tries to improve where she can. So that aside, that's the personal stuff, which I think it got quite personal. The other side of it is that, as I said before, Richard's point is still valid. It's a good question, and it's a question that we need to talk about, I guess, on the show as a serious subject. But I don't have the answers. I mean, do I like female-only leagues? No, I don't. And I know that Rachel does. But I don't. I think that segregation in esports doesn't make any sense. It's not like sports where there's a physical difference, like tennis, for instance, which is our favourite throwback towards what esports might look like. And there's a reason. There's no necessary reason physically that women can't compete against men, and Scarlett does. I mean, you can talk about physiology and biology now, but that's aside as well. The point is that we're all on a fairly level playing field, so I think we should have mixed tournaments, and if you're good enough, it doesn't matter whether you're male or female. I don't really care.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with Paul. I mean, computers work in the kitchens now too, so I completely agree 100%. No problem there whatsoever.
I disagree with both of you, but we don't need to get into that.
Oh, I'll just let's get into it. I disagree too.
No, I disagree.
No, I was making a shameless joke because actually my wife is listening. But in all seriousness, I went through this on a business level and a personal level. As you know, at IPL 5, my wife debuted doing interviews. It wasn't my idea. She was doing it for Handsome Nerd, shameless plug that's coming up. But it's applicable, right? Because I can tell you right now that of course girls are going to get a leg up because of the way they look and because of things like that. And why shouldn't they? That's absolutely fine. I mean, physicality is a part of business, whether you like it or not. You can dissect it all you want, but at the end of the day, Rachel has earned every bit of praise that she gets and should just ignore the haters. I mean, I've watched her progress and just get better and better and better. So she's obviously dedicated to her craft, and she knows what she's talking about. It'd be totally different. And there's going to be girls that are going to see easy money in esports, they think, and I think are going to try to make that jump over because they feel like, it's a emerging industry and it's a way to get attention. But then you've got, sort of the females that are gamers and do know what they're talking about and are pretty. So, I mean, I think if you can hit that trifecta, who cares? It's much to do about nothing. Really, in essence, especially with Rachel, I wouldn't even pay attention to it because there's no question. I mean, everybody watched DreamHack, and she did just a fantastic job knocking it out of the park there.
And you know what, as well, just on the back of that, while we're kissing her ass, DreamHack was pretty tough for her, I have to tell you. She had a mountain to do. My job was really easy at DreamHack. I had to do one day of StarCraft with 4 matches in a nice, huge ice hockey stadium. One day, 4 games. I mean, it was a piece of cake as far as hosting is concerned. She had 3 solid days of 7 or 8 different types of games and had to know players and teams and learn the new games and all sorts of crazy stuff. And I've done that kind of stuff. It really is. A lot of people overlook the fact that a host is important to the event, but the host needs to have a semblance of understanding of what the games do, how they work, and who the players are, and know what questions to ask. And it's not always as easy as it looks. Trust me, it really isn't. So she did do a fantastic job at DreamHack, and to be fair, has done a great job all year at different events that I've seen her at.
Absolutely. Yeah. I don't want to compliment your job you did because they already jumped on me for fanboying on you once already. So, but I did appreciate all the hard work put in.
You can fanboy all you want, man. It's okay.
I hate to give validation to the lower tier people on Reddit that get on there on a course of anonymity and want to make these ridiculous claims and comments. I mean, it's like anything else. There are a good host is a good host, be it female or male, and I'll leave it at that. And my wife did say, her opinion was, it's the world we live in. That's the way it is. It's the reality of the world we live in. And everybody. The one cool thing about esports, though, is everybody kind of has to go through their baptism by fire at some point, right? Mm-hmm. Everybody has to have that one Reddit thread about them, about how they messed up or said a word wrong or didn't wear the right tie. You know what I mean? Right. So in that regard, I think it doesn't spare anybody, male or female. Everybody has to go through that.
Or propose to their girlfriend at an esports event.
Yeah, which we got married, by the way. So
even if she or other women had gotten a leg up, as to say, because of their looks, at some point they have to perform, because the community is not just going to sit around and watch some woman out there, or male for that matter, look good only and not be able to produce results. And so the point is very valid that, and it is what it is, good-looking women in a completely male-dominated industry are going to get a leg up. But but in order to get the other leg up, you're going to have to produce and do it on your own, and that's what she's been able to do.
Yeah. I would also say on top of that, sorry, Chris, just because John really sort of raises a really good point about the fact that we're only ever talking about females getting a leg up, and it's because there are so few of them out there who A, game, B, are at the top of their game, B, play for a great team, or whatever letter I'm on now. As you get older, you forget. There's the old joke for Tosspot, by the way. I had to get one of those in today. The bottom line is this. It doesn't... I would say I've had a leg up occasionally in esports because I'm English. Now, that might sound a bit odd, but in the States... I went through a period of 2 or 3 years of working in the States a lot because I had an English accent. So is that somehow, I don't know, accentism? I don't know what that is. But did I deprive someone of a job because they didn't have an English accent? Is that not the same thing? I know it's not the same thing, but you know what I'm saying. It's
the
it's
same
horses
thing.
for courses,
It's
isn't
the
it?
same thing.
The
It's
face
the same
fits
thing.
and the person fits and they fit. It doesn't matter whether the face fits.
My son's premier soccer coach is English, and he has an English accent. And guess what? Everyone seems to think he's the greatest coach in the world because he's got an English accent.
You guys
The
sound
truth
so
is, he is
smart.
the greatest coach that I've ever had. My son's ever had, but automatically, because he has an English accent, people assume that makes him a great soccer coach, and they're more willing to give him an opportunity, regardless of his resume.
True story. When I was out in the States in 2007, I was offered the chance to go and work and do some adverts, some radio adverts. One of those adverts was for I forget the company actually, but the marketing person who was talking to me and trying to convince me that I should come and do some voice advertising, voice work for them, said that this is how she tried to sell it to me. She basically said that only 45% of Americans in California trusted a Californian voice, and only 54% of Californians trusted an American voice, but 83% of Californians trusted an English voice. Therefore, if I did adverts for them and did it for, I don't know, credit cards or something, they would run and buy everything up. So, I don't know.
Wow, that's pretty weird. I wouldn't imagine that.
Well,
somebody is Skyping me. Yeah. Somebody's Skyping me something, and it brings up a good point. Is that Rachel is neither a player technically. She's not in any sort of pro team or anything. She's not a player and she's not on a team. She is a host. As a host, normally a host looks good and does a great job, and she has both of those. And looking good is just part of that. She's a host. She's not on a team. Nobody should be judging her and her abilities to be equal in this industry based on as a player or anything. I mean, they need to look at it as she's a host, and that's her job, and does she do it well? And did she get those opportunities because she's attractive? Probably in a lot of cases. And she's a female, again, in a male-dominated industry. It's just part of life. It's just the way it is.
For me, so there's two things, right? We're always talking about Rachel thing now, but I'm going to get back to the whole female-only league in a second. But, but with Rachel, I mean, all this media and all this and everything, right? It's all about entertainment, right? And I kind of look at it from the standpoint of what does the ideal person have for, in this hosting gig? Like, if I were to make the most ideal person, what would I make them? And obviously, make somebody that's very knowledgeable about the game, who's intelligent, who is very articulate, and then somebody that's actually pleasing to look at too, right? And so for me, it's like, she happens to have that, and like you said, there's not very many females that are in gaming in general. So having a pretty good looking female is a quality that not very many people have, right? So it's unique, and like you guys said, she works really hard. She's kind of overcome that, and the place that she's in is a little bit different than the female players. You know what I mean? A lot of the players have issues with them, or at least a lot of the male players have issues with all these females getting team offers and that sort of thing when they don't, right, at the same skill level. And that for me is it's a little bit different. It's not to say that a lot of the principal issues are the same, but for me it's a little bit different there. I mean, Rachel, she's been on the show before. She's a gamer, through and through from the start, and I mean, I don't think there's any questioning in that. So Rachel, obviously, jumping into the conversation it wasn't applied to her. I mean, even Richard said it. A lot of his comments weren't directed towards her. She just jumped in the conversation.
No, and that's absolutely right. It's important to point it out. He wasn't actually attacking her, but I think she felt that she was being attacked, and I think it was because of the initial post was quite an inflammatory post. I don't think Richard necessarily meant it like that, or maybe he did, but I didn't look at it and think, oh, he's trying to wind her up, but I think it did. And I think it did because she does get a lot of stick from a lot of different people about the fact that she does look good and she is a good-looking girl. But as you said earlier, the two prerequisites to the host is that you dress smart and you look smart. And that goes for me, even though I don't look good, but I can dress smart. But that goes for a female host as well. And I think that's fine. I don't know what the fuss is about, to be honest.
The chat is wondering why it's only about Rachel, and I think Richard's trying to make it about all females.
Yeah, he was.
They're bringing up Lauren and what's the other girl?
Yeah, and I think that's the point, isn't it? He wasn't aiming it at her, so we should be talking about the point he was trying to make, which is how this all started, and that is, do females get a leg up? Yeah, they do. I've seen it. I've seen it for years in esports. They definitely get a leg up, but that's not a blanket thing. That's not all of them, and I think some are actually held back. I mean, if you know, there's plenty of girls around right now that are starting to get into the hosting. Some are even doing the commentating. We've got Pansy in the UK. We've got a couple of the girls in Sweden. There's a girl in the US who does a really good job, and they're frightened. They're almost scared of kind of breaking out of what they're doing at their bedrooms to come and do these events, because they see the amount of abuse that the other ladies are getting, and they're thinking, I don't want any of that. So why the hell would I subject myself to that?
Yep.
So
that's right.
You know, I think it's up to us to stop being male retards, basically. Sorry for the retards thing. Count me in there.
Sorry.
Dude, I got so much shit for using that, like one of the shows. But but we got two really solid female hosts. I mean, in Rachel and in Zoe, right? I mean, both of them are doing so much work.
Zoe's fantastic.
Such great jobs, too. So, I mean, a lot of people are bringing up Lauren and Lindsay Sporer here. And, yeah, Lauren and Lindsay Sporer, they're obviously on the other kind of, I think, a little bit further on the other side of the spectrum, which is like, you know, they are using that appeal a little bit more, right? And
they're more eye candy.
Don't beat about the bush. They're there because of the way they look. I mean, that's my personal opinion.
I mean, that's fine. I mean,
and that's their choice. I don't have to like it or agree with it, and I can think it's stupid as hell. But that's what they chose to do, and to raise eyebrows, and it certainly did. I mean, people started passing around the Playboy pictures and stuff. I mean, that was the entire reason. And anyone who thinks differently, anyone, and especially the organization that says, "Oh no, we brought her on because she's very knowledgeable at the game," don't ever believe that. It's total bullshit.
They've never said that either. So
No, but
you know, this isn't any different
other than what they are. Then they're lying.
Yeah, well, and I don't think they do. But this is no different to TV. And I hate to keep bringing it back to TV, but this is what we're doing. It effectively is entertainment. It is TV. And I've been on shows with some real hotties in the past who have been there because they're hotties, and they know they're hot, and they know that's why they're there. Ta-da!
Mm-hmm.
Right, Tobias?
Yeah.
Is it right? is that right, though? I don't know.
I hope that they would give a leg up to attractive, smart people. I mean, you know, it's a good thing. There are two sides of the spectrum, and you know, however people choose to use their gifts, they use them that way. And John made a very good point. Look, at the end, he made two good points. One, you can choose to tune in or tune out. You don't have to like it. Nobody's forcing you to watch it. And two, it's sort of going to find its own medium where esports fans just won't put up with somebody that doesn't know what they're talking about. So just through natural selection, you know, the cream will proverbially rise to the top in regards to females.
That's the point that Rachel made that I thought was good, and I thought her arguments weren't necessarily that strong. But one of the things she did say that I really do agree with is that, you know, looks will only get you so far. They maybe give you the opportunity, but if you're terrible, you're never getting that chance again. So the people that do this job time and time again, like Rachel has been hired all year round from all sorts of different places, isn't because she dressed nicely or she looked hot. It's because maybe she was good at her job, because you don't get chances again and again and again if you're rubbish. Eventually you get found out.
Yep, agreed.
Yeah.
So as for female leagues, right? So the two. So it's actually, Tobias, do you agree with Paul or not? I
female leagues?
Yeah.
Well, here's what I like about them. From a competitive aspect, let me start over. Here's what I don't like. From a competitive aspect, I think it is unfair to pigeonhole women when it comes to gaming, because I think they can be every bit as good as a male. Like Paul had said earlier, a lot of the physical limitations may not come into play, or don't come into play at all. But what I like about them also goes back to what Paul said, which was there's an intimidation factor in gaming. So if it means that it's a stepping stone to get more girls comfortable with playing and competing, that's what I'm about, right? So if it makes them more comfortable, then great. Give them a forum and a platform to compete on, and that can always springboard them to, dream hacks.
That's actually a great idea, Tobias, because my irritation with female gaming largely stems from the Counter-Strike at ESWC, because in my opinion, it's like, why do that when you've got a Counter-Strike tournament already going on that is open to any sex? Why have you got to make one that's just for females? At the ground level, at all of the entry levels and all of the other tournaments that are played online, absolutely have a female league. If the result is that top team or top player feeds into another league which is mixed sex, and in that way they slowly get exposed to better players. And and as well as I do, over the years, you play better players, you get better. So if we never take them out of that circle, then how are they ever supposed to improve? I don't get it.
Well, it's kind of like the golfers, right? And not so much tennis, but the golfers, right? And Annika Sorestian in particular, right? She waited until she pretty much did everything in the LPGA before she decided to actually start, trying to play male events, right? And it wasn't until the end of her career she did it. And for me, it's the female only league is a lot like when I talk about NA only leagues. It's the same deal. It's about just trying to build up confidence for this
group,
set of this group
group.
Of players, whether it's females, it's a gender thing, or it's just a skill level thing, and building from there. So yeah, I mean, I think we're in agreement from that standpoint, and I think a female only league could only help gaming, like right now, especially when there's no place for them right now. I mean, they go to MLG. What do? They are literally marketing. They're only there for marketing.
Plus, again, we have to remember that female-only leagues back in the day. I mean, there was a Quake League at QuakeCon. There was a female-only thing.
Yeah, there was.
Some of that is done now. I hope that some of it's done for the same reasons that we're talking about, to allow females to feel more comfortable. I mean, at one point it was 1% or less females going to QuakeCon, and now it's close to 9%, which is getting better and better. But the idea of having it, let's be honest, it was probably partly because it's a female-only tournament. It's going to draw eyeballs from the men as well. So event organizers that do those sorts of things, we have to remember sometimes it is exactly for what we've talked about before, which is they do it for entertainment value. I hope, though, that sometimes they did it because they felt this is an opportunity for the females to feel part of it.
No, I really doubt that, John. I think the majority of it is done at the larger events like ESWC. I remember that the female gamers from Counter-Strike this year, their final was on the main stage, and I think the men's CS got relegated to the back room because the women's CS was still going on. And the reason for that was pure and simple. One word: marketing. And that's it. Because what it did do at ESWC, more than any other game probably, and more than any other tournament in the world that I know of, is it brought the mainstream press in. The likes of the BBC channel come in and they interview all the French players and all the females, because it's easy entry for them as far as they're concerned. It's good to show gaming like that. So I suppose you could argue that actually some of the top female gaming inadvertently helps eSports become a bit more mainstream. But screw the mainstream. We've been there, we've tried that, we've tried to make it go mainstream, and I'm sick of it. I want it to be what it is, why we enjoy it, and if other people get pleasure out of what we do, then great, we'll enthuse them about that and they can join in. But as far as getting the couch potato to sit there and watch a game of Counter-Strike or StarCraft or League of Legends, if you don't want to watch it, go and switch over to the porn show. I don't care.
All right, that's enough for the latest topics lately. Unfortunately, there obviously TSL got disbanded too, but I think lots of other folks will be talking about that this week. But wanted to get to Tobias and just kind of what he's doing at EMG, and why don't you talk a little bit about I guess you starting EMG, and then kind of lead us to where you are now.
Sure. Well, as you said earlier, I did start off as a caster. Was always, since I was a young child, just enamored with games. It's sort of a family tradition. It was card games in my dad's generation, and then chess, board games, and sort of for my generation, I started with like a Commodore VIC-20 data cassette, then graduated to a Commodore 64, and on up the line. Paul and John may remember computers that are that old, but I doubt anybody else really
I have
does.
no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah, I know you did. I actually know you. But I'm going to call you out on that one. But it got to the point where I said, okay, I was looking to do something different. I'm an entrepreneur at heart, and I wanted to just get into casting for fun. And then as I sort of saw the entire, like, the zeitgeist of the whole esports world coming into form in 2010 and 11, I thought, wow, there's a real need here for professional representation. So I used casting as a way to sort of get in, meet who I needed to meet, and sort of do a proof of concept in my own mind of can this work the way I want it to work. And a couple of things had led up that really showed promise. And you talk about mainstream and you talk about television, and honestly, I don't feel like television is going to look anything like it does now in even 5-10 years. I think everybody can agree with that. I think we're sort of esports is ahead of the curve in terms of entertainment, where it's all going to be filtered, online through apps and a lot of self-producing people. YouTube was just the start, right? Now you have people producing shows, podcasts, everything. So I saw this opportunity to represent talent, and really the need and came from, I remember a contract dispute with, I think it was Complexity and Stefano.
Yes.
A while back.
That was
and I thought, and now, regardless of who was at fault or whatever, I don't care about any of that. I love both. Illis and, of course, Complexity is great, but what it came down to was, that's when there was another aha moment was, you know what, both teams and players are going to need protection. And as esports becomes more successful, fortunately or unfortunately, it becomes a lot more litigious. So I saw a need there where, okay, I think that both teams and players could benefit from, a little bit more clear-cut legal precedent that are going to have to be set over the next coming years.
So you went into it like looking to represent players more so than personalities, because if you look at your roster right now, it's mostly personalities.
No, actually, so that's not exactly true either. I went into it wanting to represent anybody in esports. It didn't matter to me because I thought that I saw this fantastically talented group of people and said, where do my strengths really lie? I never wanted to be a main stage caster. I had a lot of fun debuting the beta casting program at MLG, and then eventually, Clutch got that whole thing started, and then got handed off to me as Clutch got moved more into a production hosting aspect, and I had a lot of fun doing it. But it really, I thought that I could definitely contribute better on the business end, and that's where I really started to look deeper in if I should make the full investment with my life into esports and make that a full-time career, and was fortunately be able to be put in that position. And that led to I had a poker background, so I wanted to work with Brian Ballsbaugh for a long time because he saw the same thing I did in poker, which was a lot of talent there as well that wasn't sort of unorganized, and they weren't capitalizing on a lot of the eyeballs they had, much like esports. So I flew out to Vegas, met with him, and he got it right away. He said, "This looks just like poker did in 2002. I love it." And he started just getting this voracious appetite for everything esports and reading up on everything and examining it. And I think a couple more phone conversations, a couple more trips out, and that was it. We were off and running. And so we launched with essentially a handful of talent. We were very strategic in who we picked and who we asked to come on board first, because we felt like the people that we picked were, one, brave enough, and two, could see the opportunity, and also patient enough, because things like this take a long time. It's not something like, okay, you sign a contract, you're represented by professional management, you have an agent, and then boom, work starts flowing through the door, and new sponsorships are flowing through the door. It takes a lot of time. a lot of time, unless you're Paul. Unless
Hey,
you're Paul.
Hey, no,
Tobias.
no, seriously. I had my first agent was actually Creative Artists, CAA, who are enormous talent agency in California, in Hollywood. They look after Tom Cruise and Van Diesel and the likes of that. And that was back in 2007. And this guy tapped me up at QuakeCon in 2006, actually, and I did a deal with them for a year. But trust me, it's exactly like Tobias says. It's not like, hey, I've signed up to I literally signed up and went, okay, I'm ready.
Right. Well, actually,
Hit me with all the deals, man.
So I was
Hit
like,
me.
what the hell? This guy's crap. He's terrible. Where's the work?
Actually, Paul, I talked to them about you a little bit.
You did?
And they said the only reason that they even really wanted you was for your English accent. In California, it's 85% more likable.
Larry
Whatever,
Shapiro.
but,
If
you
you're
know.
watching, you're a dead man.
So, for those
yeah,
of you,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
for those of you, for everybody that doesn't know who you launched with, who were the personalities you picked or people you picked?
Yeah, so the first couple was sort of a broad spectrum. We had Tasteless. Of course, Nick Plott came on. Clutch was actually the first to sign. He signed the same day, I think, as Nick did, but he signed before Nick, so he was technically our first signed contract. And then Gandhi as well, and DMAC. And that kind of rounded out StarCraft host position, first-person shooter / Halo, and community. So that was the original launch. We also had Golden Boy on there, who was again first-person shooter, Call of Duty, very talented, multi-talented person, and a guy that doesn't have to be pigeonholed just into one FPS.
Tobias, people are going to ask, and I'm only asking it because I know it's an interesting question.
Sure.
Is what makes you the professional in doing
John
these things?
John actually wanted to say, what gives you the right?
No, I didn't actually want to say
Great
that.
question.
We should just feed
say it.
lines to Paul and just
Who
let
the
Paul
hell
ask
are
the
you
question.
anyway, Tobias?
It sounds so much better with the English accent.
It does. It sounds very nice, even though we know it's very rude.
Right. No, it's not rude at all. It's a great question. It's a question I would
No,
ask.
it's
Why the hell would I want to sign with you, kind of thing?
Right.
Right.
Well, fortunately for me, in my personal life, I've hit some home runs in terms of business, so that I have that going for me. But more importantly, I think, was who I chose to partner with, which is Brian. I mean, he's the real professional, expert agent, and he had filled a mentor role that I had needed in this industry perfectly. So we talk daily, and it's his expertise mixed with my knowledge of eSports and some X factor in there got us off the ground and deals flowing. So the answer is I'm not the expert, and I would never pretend to be. But we have a great team, and I think that any great company is only as good as its people. So that's where we are. We stick to just people that work very, very hard, and I think you're going to see a lot of that come to fruition over the first 2 quarters this year in particular.
So I got a quick question to jump in across Chris.
go for it.
What sort of deals have been done already, Tobias?
Yeah,
in
that
terms,
was
I know
gonna be
you've
my
done
next
the. I stole your thunder. Sorry, Chris. I know you've done a deal for. Were you part of the deal with Tasteosis with Thermal Take, the TTE
Yeah.
sports guys?
Yep.
Yeah, we did that deal.
Clutch,
So-
right? Yep.
Essentially, there was on it as well with the Alpha Brain. So whether or not you choose to agree with nutraceuticals or any of that, it's funny because a lot of people said, we ask our clients. Part of what EMG does is gets to know the clients on an individual basis and tries to really readily assess what their goals are and how we can best help accomplish those goals. So the money really is kind of secondary. It's what's your passion, what are you good at, and how can we help? And then, now we go out and we build decks and we approach people. So one of the products that Nick used was Alpha Brain. And it's funny to see a lot of people being like, oh, he's just using this product now because we got the deal. No, actually, we took a list of products he already used and liked and could back up, and then we went to those people. So the On It was another one we did, and I really feel like I hate to say this, we'd have a whole lot more to talk about though in about a month and a half. because we're launching about
Just-
3.
It's
we have
fine,
3
Toby.
now.
Toby, just tell us now.
Just
one's-
exactly.
Yeah, I know,
You're
I wish
so,
I
Tell us.
You're
You
so
can
Well,
tell
okay,
us.
so I'll give you one.
you're so stealth about everything, man.
This isn't quite as sexy as the other ones, but everybody had 2010, 2011 saw this great website, Handsome Nerd, where you can go on and buy some T-shirts. And I think, admittedly, that Nick and Dan didn't have enough time to really dedicate to the site and get it out there the way it should. So Handsome Nerd will be relaunched, not just as a website, but it's going to be multifaceted, a lot of community involvement, a lot of interaction, and as well as products. And that's going to coincide with HNN, which is Handsome Nerd Network, which will be debuting here shortly, and that's going to feature a lot of different shows from across esports, and as well as some original content. So we shot some original content at IPL 5. There's a Handsome Nerd Network YouTube up. You can check that out, and you can kind of see sort of the beginnings of what we're going to be trying to accomplish here throughout the next year.
So you're talking about a Handsome Nerd, all this kind of Handsome Nerd products, network and just the website. Is this EMG or is this Nick in Artosis?
Right, yes.
Like, how does that fall?
That's a good question. So essentially, we have partnered with Nick and Dan in the venture. So it's an EMG Tastosis production, if you will. So we sort of they don't have the time to really get down into the nitty gritty of the website and everything. So really, it's our job to make sure we get 95% of it done and bring the 5% of the decisions to them and say, okay, look, here's the artwork that we feel would come out the best. What do you think of this? Here's the shirt designs at the very top. What do you think of these? And it can be done in 45 minutes as opposed to them trying to find web designers, trying to find people to do the original content. We've got some very exciting things going on in Korea that we're producing as well with those guys. So it just made sense, just to partner. And that's another thing that EMG likes to do is, in certain cases, it's not always about just representing and finding different sponsors. It's also about, does this make sense to build a business together? And, in certain instances, you're going to see a few of those crop up over the next couple months.
And on top of that, Toby, are you doing negotiations for these guys for events?
Yeah.
Okay, so follow-up question, and this is
Sure.
this is going to be kind of weird because I can't say what I earn from things. And you can't tell me what others earn from things, but we kind of all know what we earn. That's a bit weird. So bear with me, chat. This is going to come out a little bit weird, but would you say
Make
that
a lot of money?
Yeah, this year I've noticed that the fees have gone up compared to last year, and they've steadily gone up to, I think, what is now a pretty decent rate for commentators, observers, hosts, and the people that are sort of peripheral, really, to the overall game and the tournament, but really important into making it enjoyable for the people that tune in. Have you seen that explosion, or even just a gentle rise in fees this last 2 years?
Yeah, I mean...
And do you think they're an acceptable level, or do you think they should be even higher, or should they be lower?
Okay.
And additionally to that,
Yeah.
do you think it's part of our responsibilities as a collection of hosts and commentators that we don't take too much money out of esports to try and help it, become profitable over time?
Okay, let's start backwards. Let's start with that question. No, absolutely not. You should never, ever say, I'm going to take less to help esports survive. Yeah. And the leagues, and I might draw some fire for what I'm going to say, but it's the truth, and it's business, and it's the way it is. If you have an audience that rivals an NBA Finals, and you're not monetizing that, and you're not able to pay your talent on par with what they're getting paid in regular broadcast television, or at least levels close to that, shame on you, right? Then somebody else needs to figure out how to do that. So never take a step back and ask for less. I casted 12 hours a day at MLG, was happy to do it, did it for free to start. And so I understand where the casters are. Now, you bring up a good point. Personalities and players. And this is a sensitive subject. It was a really sensitive subject a little while ago, but what people need to understand is without the personalities, if you've ever listened to a football game without any commentary, they tried this one season, in one game in particular. It was horrible. It was just a terribly unentertaining experience. So there is a balance. It's not all about the players. You need somebody to tell the story. And right now, the storytellers are the most important part of esports. So where it's on you, the burden that's on you guys as talent isn't to ask for less. It's to perform well enough so non-endemics and people like the broadcast bigwigs that control all the marketing dollars say this is worth investing in. So it's actually about wanting to attain more and asking for more and pushing the leagues to do better so that it is seen more mainstream. And I hate to use the word mainstream because, again, I feel we're ahead of the curve here. They have to catch up. So I think rates are where they should be currently in the current economic bubble that we live in. Bubble probably a bad term. But I don't think anybody's getting paid what they deserve. Let's put it that way. Now,
I can second that.
In fairness, the money isn't there yet due to certain organizations and I'm not pointing fingers, I'm not blaming them. This is the reality again. Certain organizations not being able to get those dollars in, and it's a hard thing to do. It's not as easy as, hey, we had X amount of viewers, come sponsor us now because we're this fantastic organization, we're this great league. No, it doesn't work that way. There's a lot of trust that has to be developed. There's a lot of proof of concept, but I feel like 2013 is definitely going to be a big year. And the key for talent is to have to maintain the balance of, look, prize pools are great for players. This is about the players, but without anybody to tell this story, this doesn't go anywhere.
Yep.
So everybody from players to talent should expect more.
I think in general, a lot of people are saying, I've seen it multiple times recently that, esports about a year ago, the casters were so important, to the success of a tournament. And because of that, the rates for casters were quite high, I think, or at least probably the average, for at least the big events. I felt were big. But
I think
nowadays we're seeing.
I disagree with you, Chris. It's odd. Fees are weird. Okay, so when you've worked in TV, I had a couple of very interesting years actually working in TV in the States with DirecTV and with Sky in Europe and Eurosport. So big companies worldwide. And it sort of blew my mind in terms of the amount of money that I was earning from them because I'd never experienced that kind of highly professional sports level TV before. And this was 2007, 2008. And I even my highest fee that I charged per day this year was 4 times less than it was when I earned on a TV show doing Sky or Eurosport or DirecTV because I was one of the lowest paid on those TV shows. So when Tobias talks about does anyone in esports currently get paid what they deserved, well, no, they don't. Simply they don't because it's not even comparable. So I know we're almost comparing apples and pears really, but a top sportscaster in the States compared to a top esports caster here, there is a world of difference between those two people right now, and hopefully in the future there won't be.
Yeah,
I think what Chris was talking about, though, is the disparity between, and this was brought up by several players, actually, the disparity between the organizations and the amount of money that they were paying casters at the time. Because, to be honest, to get StarCraft to where it was and to get esports kind of back to where we knew it was once before, it relied a lot on Twitch TV and the casters and the personalities. So they were getting paid. And if your tournament didn't have top name casters, nobody cared. Nobody, people in StarCraft didn't see it as that great of an event. So I think the disparity between how much they were getting paid as compared to the prize pool that was going out to the players, there was this why are we paying 3 times the amount to have one caster as we are for the prize pool? So I think people are getting paid what they deserve even now. Do we deserve more? Yes. Is there enough money in the industry? No.
Yeah,
no.
I don't know.
That's the key point, right? So motorsport has gone through kind of like a a similar road to what we're going through. If you ever get a chance to read a biography by a guy called Murray Walker, then please do. He was a commentator very early on in motorsport in the 40s and the 50s. His dad used to ride motorcycles, so he was sort of in his blood. And he did what we're doing now. He would go off to an event somewhere in England on his own money. He'd turn up and he'd go to Brands Hatch and he'd commentate over the radio at Brands Hatch all weekend for no money, and then he'd drive home on his motorbike after. And he did that every weekend for like 10 years without ever getting paid for it. And finally, as radio and TV took off, so did his career. Now, to cut a very long story short, he had a very long and successful career, but in the 60s and the 70s, he was probably getting paid more money to commentate on motorsport than any of the drivers were. Now, that's unthinkable today when you talk about Formula One. That would be like me getting paid more than Lewis Hamilton to talk about it. So I think what's happening is we're following a very similar line. And at the moment, there's some disparity, but that's because, well, the voices and the faces bring in the numbers. And I think they still do. I think it's lower than it used to be, but they still do. But I think over time, eventually, when this really does explode, the players will be earning ridiculous amounts of money, and they won't care what the commentators are getting.
Tobias,
and they shouldn't now either. I mean,
no, they shouldn't, really, but I understand why they do.
Yeah, it's not fair to compare. It's an unfair comparison for prize pool to what they're actually getting paid their fee, because one, they're not even close. The prize pool's way higher than their fee. It's not even affected for the major tournaments. I don't care what anybody says. It is not even. The prize pools are fine, and they're not hurting because of the casters. Two, it's more, if you look at, compare it to the overall production, the lighting for DreamHack. What do you think the lighting cost at DreamHack? I mean, that was amazing, and it's a very key component.
Easily 100K, close to 100K probably.
Yeah, exactly. So and it's smart to do that because you're finding the money for the things that matter. Lighting is a huge element. So
it creates entertainment
guys,
value.
I mean, think about it. 5 years ago, and trust me, I've been here. I'm not going to claim to be an agent or a talent spotter or whatever, but I've done my fair share of finding commentators and bring them to events, and I'm sure Tosspot will back me up on this. We weren't getting paid fees. I pushed really hard on events to make sure we got paid something, and it wasn't always a huge amount of money. Sometimes only £50, but it was something, and it was a start of we need to get paid if we're going to do something, because you can't keep bringing us out making money off our talent, frankly. And we don't benefit from that. That's not how it should work anymore. So it's taken a long time to move from that kind of world, 5, 6, maybe 7 years ago, 8 years possibly, where we were doing this for nothing, to a point where we're actually getting paid. But what we're actually doing right now is we're comparing players with casters and money, and actually they're completely different jobs. So what the hell are we even talking about it?
Exactly. No, exactly.
Yeah,
That's totally fair.
So Tobias, getting back to kind of what you guys do for your clients. Paul mentioned once he signed on with this one guy, he was like, okay, I'm ready. So where are all the deals? I mean, so how does that work exactly? I mean, do they just give you a guideline, or do you just go and find stuff and then you present it to them, like any opportunities to them, or how does it work?
This is like, yo, Tobias, give me some bitches.
Exactly.
I think he does okay there on his own. But,
do you get to be a diva? I mean, do you guys have divas? Guys are like, hey, I want my own green room.
We're all divas.
Water in clear plastic bottles
only. That's a great question, John. I have had... so we've done deals. We have other things going on with other personalities, not necessarily clients either. We'll do a one-off deal if something comes up and one of our talent will pass on it. We can always... Maybe it's not a good fit. Well, we can approach other people. But the diva question is good. Here's the funny part. I have approached some talent, and I won't say who. It's not fair to them, and I would never call them out like that. But there were some people I'd talked to that expressed some interest in possibly coming on. And for us, it would be a total loss leader. But, one I would be willing to take on just to help the growth bottom up kind of thing as well. And those people had been the most diva-ish. Like, well, what are you going to do for me in this regard? I'm like, well, okay, you're making zero now, so
Tumba.
Why you gotta call me out, dude?
Told me you wouldn't tell anyone.
Why you gotta call me out, dude?
That's the problem of that is that there are people that are starting to, and we talked about this I think last week or the week before, but because people are starting to make money, there's all this influx of people going, oh, really? This is all I got to do, and I do this. Amazing. Give me some money for it. They don't realize that, guys. A lot of us had did this for years for hardly anything, if anything at all.
No, it cost. I think it's fair to say anybody has done anything last year or the last year. I mean, forget about the Counter-Strike days and all that, that was like beyond slave labor at that point. That was just craziness. And now it's actually becoming a sustainable business. But I think still in 2011, nobody really made money, including if you count the travel time and everything else and what people are getting paid to broadcast to the same amount of audience in maybe more, like I think it cost everybody money.
I actually made good money last year, but that's because I had a 9 to 5 Monday to Friday job.
Right. Yeah, but you're
okay. There you go.
And then
did
23 weekends, by the way.
Right.
But 2005. Again, just the fact that Tosspot's in the channel. He and I flew out to Dallas on our own dime to do QuakeCon. You know, we actually paid £800. I think it was £820 or something stupid for the flights. They were insane because they were in August during the school holiday, so they were the most expensive flights known to man, and we paid. You know, and we went out and we did it on our own thing. And then we weren't, unique by any stretch of the imagination. There were dozens of us doing it back in 2005.
Well, the teams and the players paid to go there too.
Absolutely,
and we all did it.
Everyone did.
Right, because we wanted to be a part of something great. And now everybody, I've ran tournaments where we may only have $200 on the line, and we're only looking for 8 players. And I literally will have people tell me, "Oh, it's not worth my time. I'm not going to make any money doing it," or that's not enough money. They don't understand that. I mean, and the console community still very much is like this. 61 teams showed up at a Chicago tournament this weekend, and all 61 teams paid to get into the tournament and play. And they paid their own way there, most of them. Some had a few teams, but most of them paid their own way to get there and play. This is the way it used to be, and sadly, I think that we need to get a little bit back to that instead of everyone worrying about me, what can I get out of it. There's still a lot of work left to be done. If we just keep asking for money, we're just going to take money away that could be used to actually grow esports. And anyway, that's my rant. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I mean, but it's just I find it funny that the guys we haven't had. There's not a single diva moment really on the roster. Especially if you gauge it on the barometer of having, like Tastosis at the very top, who you think would be the most arrogant / non-accommodating. I'm not going to do this. It's so the opposite. It's more on the bottom end. And I've worked. Look, I was like part of the other reason I got into this. I was like the king of the B casters, man. All of them. Caleris. We hired Caleris at Stim TV, and then I launched Playhand TV and hired him there, and then he went on to Mouse, and then of course ESI. He's doing a fantastic job now. Robin Tivo, who ended up at IPL.
Yeah, IPL.
From Kibbles, who ended up at all these guys. Adebisi, we all worked together, kind of thing, and we all had that same attitude that John's talking about. But we also did what Paul said, was we finally went to MLG and said, "Look, you have to pay us something." For our time, and they agreed. They said no, for sure. Like we get it. It was a test in Orlando, and they accommodated us very nicely. For I think for what we were doing. But that's kind of the crux is new people coming in to esports need to appreciate the investment of what people have put forth thus far, and kind of I think there needs to be a better sense of propriety for what's going on. Nick and Dan didn't just become the best casters in StarCraft overnight. They went to Korea. They were broke. There was a lot of heartache along the way, and a lot of sacrifices made. And they were basically homeless. And you had guys like Juani over there helping them out with getting around. They're in a foreign country. They can't speak the language. They're way out of their element, and they've made these sacrifices to get there. And then you get a guy that comes into esports now and is maybe has some followers on YouTube and is getting a little bit of a Twitter following, and all of a sudden thinks that, he deserves X, Y, and Z, when I really don't think that they've put in the time, the effort, and the sacrifice. Yeah. You better be damn good. Let's put it that way if you're going to be making those demands. But
that, you realize that all of this kind of goes back to the whole idea of the leg up thing too.
Yeah,
because there are people that will come in.
True, exactly.
And admittedly, I've been butthurt by this because I've been doing this for a long time, and then there's these people that come in, and because of who they know, where they live, all sorts of little advantages that they might have over me, without all of the work that was put in, they get a leg up. But again, at the end of the day, I have to realize that's just part of life. But I agree. I mean, I would like to see more people realize the sort of sacrifices that have been made to get people to where they are. I mean, people just see Tatosis and they where he is now and not realizing everything that he went through to get there.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point as well, John. I don't know how you feel about this, Tobias, but I try not to get too frustrated with these guys that sort of come along, and you know the ones I'm talking about. They kind of swan in and like, hey, what's this eSports? This is pretty cool. I'm going to make some money out of this. Yeah, bitches. And you go like, excuse me, who the fuck are you? And they go, me, I'm the fucking bomb. Who the fuck are you? And you kind of go, yo, I've been here for 10 years working my fucking guts out to earn $10. And you just swan in, and you think you can just run everything, and it does feel a bit like. And as I said, I try not to be like that because I do encourage a lot of new people to come along, and
we
like
need new
you
people.
have, you know, we've brought a lot of people on through Quad V. I'm absolutely determined in my job at ESL this year that we'll do the same thing. We'll bring the commentators that we've got up to a much higher standard even where they are now, and we'll bring new talent on, and we'll train them, and we'll get them up to a good standard as well. So. We definitely need that, but there was a comment earlier in the channel that said we don't want old guys doing commentary. Yeah, we do, because they're the best. Like go and have a look at any sports. Go and listen to baseball radio in the States. Go and listen to NFL. Go and listen to football in the UK. Anyone you like. All of the commentators, bar zero, will be older than the players. Fact.
Yeah.
Heavyweight fights, same thing. Like you don't see, you know. Anybody, good cast broadcasting is an art, and it really does take a long time to develop what it takes to entertain the masses, not just the niche few, not just the guy that reads every single Team Liquid post and knows the eye color of every player, but can actually reach out to new people and say, make an impact. Where a lot of people I've exposed to esports said, look, Tob, I love video games. I would never watch it. And I go, well, just entertain me this. Just watch this. And I'll show them one GOM video or VOD. And they're like, what? Like they had no clue. And it kind of opens this whole world up. But I think a lot of the key of that is like, a lot of what Husky did. And a lot of what Nick and Dan did, where they take their time to, if it's only for a minute, reach out. Hey, if you're new to StarCraft, blah, blah, blah. And that's so important because exposing new people to this that don't even know that they like it yet is so important, and it's that is more important to me than having a caster that knows every single stat on every single player and can rattle off every tournament they won for the past 20 years.
I totally agree with that. The one thing missing for me from the majority of the newer casters is telling the story. Pure and simple. I mean, that's, to me, as a commentator, not as a host now, but even as a host, but as a commentator especially, it's about telling the story. It's about, why is this such an amazing game? It's partly why we really enjoyed WCS Europe last year, because there were so many different strands of stories that the commentary team told them, and I, as a host, tried to lead those out as well. It was always, why is this game so big coming up next? Well, it's big because of this, and it hypes the whole thing, and that's the storytelling. It's just,
and you can't
get that right.
It takes work.
You can't run your league off Reddit. You can't look at. As a matter of fact, league shouldn't even read Reddit because forget it. I mean, and I'm a Redditor. But it doesn't mean that I take their advice on the the overall.
But you read it for the entertainment value.
Yeah, I mean, because here's the point: is
it's a cesspool.
You have, it is a cesspool. You have, that's the best word for it. But you have. How many different games, like at an MLG? 50 different ways to view 7. You can't possibly follow 7 different games, even if they're muted and you're only listening to one. I don't care who you are; it's impossible. I mean, and if you can, fine. But I know that the majority of people can't. So my point is this:
you haven't heard DJ Week commentate 3 matches at the same time.
Well, that I could. Okay, that I could probably follow. but the point is, because he can commentate all weekend long and never crack at all. Like he sounds like day one all the time. But my point is this: get rid of half the streams and make it more about a story. Let him go back to maybe even a more of a community-based casting for the replays for the guys that want to look up those VODs in a library and check them out. But if you let the broadcasters and producers produce more of a show, more of the storytelling of what's going on live at the moment, that's the key excitement. It's not about how much can we broadcast? How many games? It shouldn't be about the quantity. It should be about the quality. And I think if they focus less on, you know, being able to show 17 different streams and more on, oh my God, TriMaster beat a Korean. Let's tell that story. Let's follow that. And the producers are able to free their time up to follow those stories and create the stories. That's going to allow the hosts and the broadcasters to get even better and do a better job. I know a lot of fans might not, you know, adhere to the idea initially anyway, because they want to see everybody.
It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of work to do that, though. It takes.
Yeah, it
you
does.
Know what I mean?
But itself, you know, I've said this to a lot of casters in the past. You either have very thick skin and you read everything,
Yep.
or you don't have thick skin and you read nothing. And the only time you want